Okay, so I'm just going to open today's event. So the career advice I never had. And super excited to have people with us today. As I say, I know we're going to have other people trickling in, but just excited to come together virtually. And today, really, we want to get out of discussing kind of the things that from two different perspectives. One is kind of more from the corporate sector and more really based from an island perspective. So having experienced that career progression through being on islanding in Grand Cayman, and then also kind of the overseas perspective, also from a non-profit charitable kind of view as well. So hopefully you'll get a bit of a flavor of diversity of kind of career pathways, experiences, connection, and what that means internationally. And hopefully we wanted people to encourage you to ask questions, to be able to, butt in and even share some of your own, kind of experiences and stuff as well, because there's lots of things that both Alison and I want to learn from you as well. But hopefully you'll come away with a few nuggets and pieces of information that have really helped us along the way in our journey. So before we get started, and hey to those who've just joined as well, hey Gabriella, I just want to introduce our wonderful guest speaker, Allison Fernandez. So Allison is a human resources professional. So she has 7 years of experience in the financial services sector in the Cayman Islands. So Allison started her career with a leading law firm as a scholarship recipient and joined their HR team immediately after completing her bachelor's degree. Allison's passionate about organizational culture and career development. Allison loves to help people achieve their goals by providing helpful information or connecting them with the right people that could share valuable mentorship, which I think is a really critical part of really flourishing and helping others in that kind of environment. Because it's easy once you've done, you've got your degree, you've moved in your career, it's like, oh, you could just sit back and be like, that's me, I'm good. But it takes a special kind of person to really want to give back to your community. So we're going to have a bit more of a conversation. As I say, we have the chat box open, so please do, interact, share, ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer as we go along. But Alison, just on that point, first of all, thank you so much. You are obviously from our super valued sponsor, Harneys, for Cayman Connection. And just based off that bio, I just want to get onto that mentorship point, because I think that must be something that you maybe had received yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong, which is why maybe you see the importance in it.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
So my mentorship, I think, journey with person started in high school, and they progress right through to now, to be honest, which I think is such a crucial part of your career. So my first mentor, I guess, would have been the school mentor, who quickly passed me on to someone else, because for her it was, okay, yes, I can guide you in the direction of to make the right career choice, to choose the right unis or whatnot. But then that's kind of was, I guess, the width of her help. I then worked and did an internship opportunity at a law firm because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. It's like that was not it.
And
And
just on that, actually, what was the deciding factor that made you really realize? Because I think sometimes when people go down a path so far, they think, I have to pursue it, I have to keep going. But one, it takes a lot of confidence and courage to say, what, maybe this isn't. But what was your catalyst for that decision?
thankfully for me, I didn't get that far into it. So the reason why I ended up doing internships at a law firm was because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to the first one. I was like, yeah, this is definitely it. The hustle and bustle. You can get dressed up every day. And I think living in Caymans, you don't really get those opportunities to get dressed up all the time. And I'm like 16, 17. That's what I want. I want to be dressed up and go to work and feel like a grown up. So that was that. Then as soon as I joined, I quickly realized the that wasn't the right fit for me professionally or personally. There were things that I think I wanted in my life that it just didn't align for me. And kudos to those who it does. I have a lot of friends who are lawyers and they love it. They're so passionate about it. But actually finding out that law wasn't for me is what led me to HR. So the reason I wanted to do law was because I had such a passion for like justice and equality and being a part of like reform and organizations in my community. And quickly then I realized, but I can also do that through another career path, which is what led me to HR. I think even at that time when I decided I was going to do HR, I still didn't fully understand what it was. I mean, some days at work still, I'm like, do I fully understand what I'm doing? Maybe not, maybe I do. But it definitely was that detour of that. I did A-level law, and even that was like, okay, this isn't terrible, but again, it's very consuming. And I wanted to enjoy uni as well. I wanted to go to uni and do well, but I also wanted to go to university. And this was the first time I was going to be living away from my mom, living outside of Cayman. So it was very much, I want to go and enjoy that experience as well,
Mm.
which I do think is also very important for career development because it somehow links back.
Yeah,
Um, so that was a key
100%.
to it.
And it's interesting because, as you say, you're still exploring what HR is and means. It's so broad, there's so
Yes.
much to HR, looks different in different organizations. But one of the things you said before we kind of officially started the call was you like people, things that are around people, whether that's events or whether that's clearly working and helping people, which is where the mentorship bit links in. So, um, just a like question, because I'm intrigued and curious to know what you think are the best, other than sort of the people skills bit, what do you think are the best skills that you've been able to apply in your HR role, kind of to date, that if somebody else were trying to get into that sort of sector or that area of work, that you would say actually you need to have these three things, or this is a key ingredient to kind of getting the best out of that type of role?
Um, in HR, to be honest, I think yes, it is very people driven, but that's also if that's the like if you go into like the PMC side of things, like the people management side of things, because there is an element of HR that is very strategic, that are now you have elements of HR that are very technical and it's more on the system side of things. But the area that I love is the people side of it. And I think the skill set for that is it can be so varied because I look at my colleagues, I look at past persons I have worked with, and I do see similarities in our personalities, but we're also very different. And the way we approach things is very different. But I think one of the things is just being very, very approachable and open. And I think a lot of times that's a quality and a value in yourself. I think that a lot of times go unpraised or uncelebrated because in school, the chatty ones or whatever, the ones I keep seeing this meme on Facebook that it's don't move me from sitting beside someone, even if I sit beside the teacher, I'm gonna talk to her. And it's I think sometimes in HR having that ability to connect with people, be empathetic to things is really sometimes what will make you help form those relationships and will help drive those relationships forward that then do develop over time and you make those connections that can take you from one space to the next. You
Mhm.
are that's one space to the next, whether within that role, within that organization, or just the HR community at large. Um, I think other things in HR that maybe would be really crucial is attention to detail, which
Mhm.
I think is something that is just across the board for things, for all careers. But then also outside of that, I think just being able to sometimes say, you know what, actually, I'm not sure. Let me come back to you on that. Which is something that I don't think I figured out until later in my career, because when you're so junior, I think you want to come across as though you have all the answers, that you're
Right.
so equipped to do this. And most times you're really not. You're just entering, you're just learning now, just learning when to give that pushback of, let me double check this with X person and let me just read this. Or how about we go and explore this all together, come back and see where we both land and having those conversations, I think.
Mhm. It's really interesting because I agree. I think there's so much to know, and I think Melody said as well. Yeah, she agrees with you. The exploration of HR never ends, um, and I think we always want to know what the answer is, and have come across in this way that we're super duper professional, whatever that is, whatever professional means, that you've got every single answer. But one of the things that I've certainly found, and obviously, as I say, we have quite contrasting experiences, right? So, I actually studied sport management at university, so I'm sport through and through. But I was always in the sport development sector. So I worked for always in community engagement, hence the link with Cayman Connection and charity. And it was always about bringing people together and helping develop people using a tool, whether that tool is, cultural heritage-based activities we do through Cayman Connection, or whether it's sports. But again, it's all people. And I think one of the things that people really respect, and where I found I've developed relationships with those people probably who've been the big decision makers, who've opened lots of doors, who've provided funding, who've done all those things, it's just being human. And it's just being able to make people laugh. It's having a real endearing, sort of curious nature around you. It's not wearing a suit, sitting down, being really like robotic and being really worried about what you're going to say and using really big words. Because a lot of the time, people don't even really relate to that, or it kind of puts a really awkward barrier between people. And sometimes people come from different educational backgrounds, so they might not even relate and know what those kind of terms mean. But we can all do simple. And I think the more that we simplify things, we break down barriers. You take a genuine interest in somebody. So, you want to know how their week's been. It's not just a tokenistic, like, yeah, how are you? And I think it was interesting because one of my meetings I had in Cayman in August, because obviously I come back for partner meetings, and I sat down opposite someone and we kind of met and we'd interacted over email and stuff. And we sort of sat and I was like, so how's things your side? And they were just like, yeah, good. And it was really limited conversation. And then the same happened, Cayman Connection, what's going on? And it was just very surface level. And I just said, like, what does a great week look like for you? Like, tell me what you actually do outside of this stuff. And I cannot tell you, Allison, we hit it off. We went out partying. We did this, we did that. We went to like fest, like we did everything there. And it was like the once the barrier is down of like transactional, you want something from me, I want something from you. We're kind of like having to get something out of this. There needs to be an outcome. It kind of puts pressure on. Whereas if you're just like, I want to get to know you, like, tell me about you, because I think sometimes we let these opportunities pass us by so much. And when we really take attention to detail of somebody, it makes all the world of difference. People love talking. One another thing that I picked, loads of everyone loves talking about their children. Everyone does. Like, if you are somebody like, I mean, I have a stepdaughter, right? And if you go into a meeting and you somehow get someone talking about their children, they will love you forever. Like, they will not stop talking at all. And it's a beautiful thing because it's from here. And then it's like, okay, now we know who you are, but it has to be authentic at the same time. So I don't know if you've had any sort of similar experiences. And thank you. So I see some people are listing their occupations in. So we're going to come back to those and kind of link that in. It's really interesting to hear. But yeah, what's your thoughts on the people's stuff in that sense, Allison?
100% agree with the kid thing. Just yesterday, I said to someone, I was like, I will talk to a tree about my son. I will sit there and rant on about, and he said this, and then that is a real thing. And even in workplaces, in everything, no matter where you are, as long as you can get someone talking, and like what you said, as long as it's authentic. And I think again, like, just always be true to you, because people can
Yep.
always tell when you're not being authentic. When you're being
Amen.
pretentious or stuffy or whatever it is, you people see through that so easily. And then they disconnect because they're not getting something true from you. So then why should I open up and be
Mm-hmm.
true to you about what it is, no matter what it is, even whether that's you're sitting in an interview for a scholarship, a job, whatever it may be, or I'm having a work meeting with you. People see through that and they do open up so much more about what it is that they're wanting. Yes, the transactional relationship remains in most things because that's just the nature of life, isn't
Yeah.
it? But
Yeah.
once you get past those things, you can get so much more from the relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
whether that's to help make that transaction that much better, that much quicker,
Mm-hmm.
or whether then it's to form another relationship that can maybe lead you to another opportunity, whether that's within that same space or something else. So like in your example of you found a FET partner,
Mm-hmm.
I'll work with you, but then also let's go out and party, let's have a good time together. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's when those relationships, very mindful of how I'm saying this because not all relationships need to, some
Sure.
relationships do really benefit from having clear parameters and boundaries.
Yeah, you
But
can't party with
sometimes,
everyone. Let's get that
no,
straight. We can't.
no, don't do it. There are some people who they try to be, don't, that's, you're not my friend. You're my coworker. Let's leave you at work. But there are those persons who it's no, I think if I get this, if I come out of this space with you, we can benefit so much more from this relationship. And sometimes then it's simple things of, okay, let's not maybe have a meeting in the boardroom or in a boardroom
Yep.
somewhere, but let's go. So for example, in the building that I work, there's a coffee house right downstairs. It's let's maybe
Mhm.
go to Southwest and have a meeting in there. Just the change in scenery can sometimes
Yeah,
bring out different elements in people, which I
absolutely.
think is so beneficial sometimes for that immediate conversation or conversations thereafter, the
Yeah,
relationship thereafter.
agreed. And I think one of the things that we don't realize, it's really subconscious, is we create these really odd stereotypes that no one's written this rule that a meeting has to be in a conference room where you sit opposite each other, you have a notepad out, you're very focused. And one of the things that, so I've been in management now for a good few years. And when I used to have one-to-ones with my team members, we used to walk in meetings. And I used to go, we used to find a beautiful park. And I know it's not, there's not as many green parks and stuff in Cayman, but you've got the beach, right?
Yeah.
So, and what we used to do is we used to schedule it. So it was kind of at a lunchtime ish. So you can break the day up as well, or an afternoon time. You get fresh air. So it's all about that kind of holistic well-being piece. But there's a difference in people's energy and shifting that forwards when you're not sat opposite and you're sat stagnant and you're kind of, again, there's a bit of a pressure to respond in a certain way. Don't get me wrong, it's more difficult for taking notes, but that's where you have to genuinely pay attention. And
Yeah.
there's creative ways of doing it. But likewise, often people in the Cayman Connection team will know that, where possible, I try to schedule phone call meetings. So, I can still be out on a walk and take notes on my phone, but it just means that from a physical point of view, I'm not sat down at a desk all day, because we all know the impact that has on not just our bodies, but also working remotely and working from home can be quite isolating as well. So I
Definitely.
don't know if I know obviously you work in the office. Did you see a shift at Harneys with the whole working from home piece and stuff like that?
Um, Immediately, I think it was such a trend that almost we didn't look for it, I think, immediately. But
Okay.
now when it's things are settled, things are back to normal, and everyone is trying to find what that new normal after COVID looks like when once we've gotten a
Yeah.
taste of, oh, this is what can really happen. Um,
Yeah.
is when I think now when we're really seeing things of, okay, maybe this doesn't work so well. And I think one of the things is from the working from home perspective is it is very beneficial, but I feel there is a lot that's lost in
Mhm.
that working from home movement. So I think there's a lot of things that you learn in office through osmosis, just through sharing an office as someone, being in a space in the same space as them. When you're, especially when you're at maybe like mid or junior level in your career, that if you share an office, for example, with your manager or someone who is a little higher on the corporate ladder than you are, there is a lot to be learned from sitting in that office, hearing the conversations that they're having, just listening to them think out loud, bouncing things off of each other that you do lose if you are working remotely for most of the week. There's those water cooler conversations of you just go to the kitchen and you get into conversation with someone, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's how you gain work or
Mhm.
have insight into something that maybe you wouldn't have had on a formal call or a formal sit down meeting because it maybe just wasn't appropriate to say in that space,
Yeah.
but they're much more comfortable to say it to you in the kitchen
Yeah.
over a coffee while they make yours and you have a cup of tea, whatever that may be.
Mhm.
Um, and just for me personally, I think too the team element of it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people love it because they're like, oh, I don't like my coworkers. I want to work at home where I can just do my work and then log off at 5 o'clock and that's it. But in every, no matter what career you're doing, no matter where
Mhm.
you work, what you enjoy about your role or don't enjoy, there is a lot to be gained and to be,
Mhm.
I think, allotted to the fact that being a part of a team is super beneficial.
Yeah.
And there's pieces that other people may bring to the table that you just never thought about it that way,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
you just didn't have that exposure to even come to that train of thought sort of thing. That if you're always working
Yeah.
from home and the only thing you're able to communicate with each other with is sometimes Zoom or Teams or whatever it may be, there are elements of development that can be lost. So
Yeah.
earlier I was saying to you that we were talking about how the fact that these things are so beneficial for, I think, things like this. But
Mhm.
if I could have the option of having a face to face with someone, I'll always choose that over
Yeah.
um virtual. And I think it's
And
also been, go ahead, sorry.
no, and I think that's sorry, just about personality types as well, because what you will find is for some introverts, they can do that working from home piece a lot better, a lot easier. It makes them a lot more comfortable. Certain types of roles will be a lot more suited to that. Like I always know when when I worked at a sports charity in Cambridgeshire, and we had our impact and evaluation lead coordinator, and she was data and analysis, right? And I was always the really chatty, like project coordinator who just wanted to like go and find out where everyone. And she would literally sit there with her headphones in, like, this is my worst nightmare because I'm dealing with spreadsheets and data and pivot charts. And you lot are just disturbing me, right? And I think sometimes we have to respect that different people's roles. If you're writing, like, I know when I'm writing funding bids and grants, I need to be locked into that document. However, I also need that brainstorming time with the team because it can't just all be coming from my head as well. So
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think the hybrid way of working, certainly for me, I've found a lot of benefit in, just because it means that you get a bit of both worlds. You get that team part, but you can also have those clear focus times as well. Um, and interestingly, one of the things I've always done with the team, I don't know, Ayanda is on the call, but I don't know if she's done it. I'm not too sure, but um, I've always used the innovation animal. So I'm going to put the link in the chat. So if you want to have a little play around whilst you're on the chat, feel free. There's so many different personality like types and psychometric testing and all that kind of thing. If you haven't done it within your team, and you don't have to be the manager, you can just be somebody like in the team who's leading and creating impact and kind of wanting to find out more about your team, like suggest it, recommend it to your manager, because I think the more that you understand people, the more you can benefit from working as a team and getting kind of information or and completing tasks together. And so I'm a squirrel, not literally, but obviously on this this thing. It's very quick, by the way, so you can do it like we'll say whilst you're on the call. So for me, a squirrel says like I like to I struggle to settle for things like they've always been done this way around here. Like, and people who don't want to find a better way, my favorite question is always like, so what? So like, yeah, you can tell me like this is always, but like, so what? And I literally, that is one of my biggest questions. Team dynamics really important to me. Creativity, having a supportive environment, respect, and things like that. Um, and I'm curious and bold and that kind of thing. But what that helps is not only do I get that introspective reflection. Don't get me wrong; these things are not always to the letter of the law, but generally they're pretty accurate. But what that also allows us to do is to understand, okay, so this person who maybe I find really difficult or I really struggle with in the team to connect to, maybe it's because so one of the animals is a meerkat, right? Maybe they're a meerkat. Maybe they're a bison. There was a bison, and there was one bison in my team, and I just always was like, why do we not like really gel and click, right? And actually, ironically, they're the two that complement each other the most because one person likes the strategic, bigger things. The bison is very short and sharp. Like I just want these like very quick win, over the line type pieces. So actually, you help complement, and usually the ones that you are not as similar to, actually you're better for higher performing. Hence the whole point of why having diverse teams is better for higher performance, right? Whether that's race, whether that's gender, whether that's personality types, religions, etc., because you have the ability to kind of pick on everyone's strengths and bring them together. And it was a shameful realization for me, because I pretty much had to rehaul one of my teams, as I say, in a prior organization. And when we did the innovation animal, everyone was a squirrel apart from one person. And that made me really realize how important blind recruitment and diverse recruitment panels are, because it's very easy. And of course, we went through that process. We had other people like on it wasn't just me like, yeah, I really like you, you're clearly a squirrel. But we do hire like for like. We like people who are like
Mhm.
us. We like people who look, sound kind of like similar things to us that we can connect to. But I think if we can almost challenge our thinking, think outside the box and be like, actually, yeah, I like this person and I could see us, going for coffee on a lunch break, and that would be great. But are they going to stretch me? Are they going to challenge my thinking on this piece of work and make me think, could I do it even better somehow? And I think that can be challenging, because what it means, we have to take our ego out of it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. And obviously, if anyone does do the animal piece, let us know what you are in the chat. Any fellow
Yeah.
squirrels?
I think two things that you said that really stood out to me, and I did have as like talking points, was the piece about how people being so different coming together works really well. When we're looking for employers, a lot of times I think sometimes we're like, oh, I really like that person in that interview, so I'm gonna sign up and I want to join this organization.
Mm,
And where that is super beneficial, because I think when choosing your career, it's also about choosing the right organization and the right managers for you, for depending on what phase of life you're in. Um, I think sometimes it's so beneficial when you are very different. So something that I'm so intrigued about at the moment is the differences between different generations.
mm,
So when I look at like what success, what career, what work looks like for a Gen Z person, it's even, I'm a millennial, and it's even very different for what work looks like for me, how I define success, how I want my career to progress and what I want that to look like. And I think it's just about sometimes the career advice that I never had is it's okay for that to change over time too. So
mhm.
whether right now you may find, okay, I loved working with X person because they were so chatty like me. They always give you the opportunity to bounce ideas off of them. You may then get to a space where you're, no, actually, I much prefer Miss Mary, who's 65, because
Mhm,
she has so much more to offer me right now. And
mhm.
again, going back to the connections thing that we spoke about at the beginning, how forming those connections with as many people as you can is just so important,
Yeah.
because we're in a really interesting space right now where there are still persons in the workplace who
Mm,
are of a very different generation than we are.
yeah.
So Harneys has quite a young workforce, but I
Mhm,
have worked for organizations before that have more of more older persons in the workforce. And at that time, I don't think I really valued what they brought to the table. But looking back at it now and just knowing some of them now and having, in typical Cayman fashion, Foster's conversations, um, it is so interesting to hear what they have to say about things like, oh, and make
mm,
sure you don't repeat these things in your career, or make sure that you do this and you do that. And I think being empathetic on both ends, and then you sharing your
mhm.
experiences with them of, oh, you're coming up for retirement now. Make sure you make them give you that flexible time so that you can pick up your grandkids from school because that's what you want to do. Don't be afraid to ask for those things.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things I wish someone had told me from the very beginning. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, because
I honestly,
you you know you better than anyone else. There are
yeah,
things that other people see in you that maybe you don't see in yourself just because of the way the brain works. But
yeah,
you know you better than anyone else. You know what your superpowers are. You know what
yeah,
your like where your weaknesses are. And don't be afraid to shine. Don't I think
yeah,
especially as a woman, a lot of times you're like, oh well, can I really do this? Should I really do this? So I come off as
yeah,
arrogant? Do I come off as cocky? You are the one, sis. Like, do
yeah.
it. No
Yeah.
one,
And
yeah.
don't wait for permission. Don't A lot of the
Yeah.
time I think we wait for permission, and it's really interesting because I think we're an all female call,
Yeah.
which again, it's it's really interesting because I think, and this is why I believe there's a lot of networks for women in certain spaces, and particularly as you go into leadership, because the generic thing is it's not the done, it's not the default type board member or director, or and I know myself, having been a manager who's under 30 in the UK, woman of color, just kind of almost all these different kind of boxes that people seem to unfortunately see as the underserved, the marginalized groups. When you step into that, it can be, you get that imposter syndrome, and we hear about it all the time, but it's real. And I think I love what you said there about advocating for yourself. And I think one of the things that I wish I'd have learned earlier on was my knowing my worth and understanding that when somebody employs you, and I say this to people all the time now, if you're going for an interview, remember, you are just as much interviewing that organization as they are interviewing you, because you're bringing your skills and everything. We get so nervous and we worry that we're going to need to answer perfectly, but it's like, you are you, and no matter how many times you've rehearsed an answer, you can't change who you are. Your character is permanent, right? Your job title is just temporary. So I think we kind of sometimes feel that we have to have this perfectionist attitude, and often what that means is we then don't feel we can ask for leniency on stuff. We think that we can't have any, we need permission to do something wrong. And I almost encourage an environment where it's not a I don't like the word fail. I don't use the word failing, but learning instead. So every time we do a project, every time we do something, it's what's our EBI, so our even better if. So even if I were to have a one-to-one with you, Alison, you smashed it out the park, you did an amazing event, social event. Everyone was like, "You're the best. We had the greatest time." It was like flat out attendance. I would still come to you and be like, "How can I make it even better next time?" Even if it's a marginal thing. So you don't sit in that room of complacency. But what that means is you might challenge me back to say, okay, actually, like, I'm going to continue to cultivate this culture of, I want to learn, I want to do better, but I'm not going to see that if something goes wrong, it's a failure, right? And likewise with that, your needs as well and well-being is so important. Don't again kind of from your side on I know, but that really taught me a lot about prioritizing my self-care. And that's when I switched to, I now do a 4-day week, so I do condensed 4-day week. So I've said to myself, I'm never working a Friday in my life again. And at that point I did a half day, so I do horse riding. So I was like, I'm gonna take off a half a day on a Friday afternoon and go horse riding. That was my thing, to get out and about, etc. And I did it, and I was like, why have I not done this sooner? And all it meant was I worked an hour, I think earlier, I can't remember where I put it onto my day for the other 4 days, which I was already doing anyway. But it meant that I got to take that time back. But it was only because I asked. My boss wasn't going to come to me and be like, hey, by the way, do you want to have a Friday afternoon off? And what that meant was everybody in my team was like, yo, she's happier, like she's enjoying, but she's more productive in the time that she's also at work as well. And then they started to do it too, and instantly you see such an improvement in people's productivity, and they value the organization because you know that people are valuing you as a person away from the desk, right? Exactly. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything you've put in place for your well-being and work, particularly from an HR perspective, that has been particularly beneficial to you.
For me, mine looks somewhat similar to yours, but I do something completely different. So just before I say that, though, again, I just think that's why it's so important to make sure that once you've chosen your career and you're done with your studies, if that's the route you decide to go, and you're now entering the working world, it's just so important to make sure that you do take that extra time to go and read what the company's vision and goals are or whatnot. And then during the interview, asking those very raw questions of, what does your week look like? The person who's currently in this role or left this role, what kind of opportunities did they have that maybe I could get, or that they maybe complained about that is what you think is a possibility now? Because for example, I have a 3-year-old son. On a Thursday, he goes to swimming, and before it would be my nanny that would take him to swimming, and I would miss out on that because I was at work. And then one Thursday, my nanny couldn't do it. So I asked my manager, I was like, hey, so sorry to ask. Don't begin with so sorry to ask because you shouldn't be so sorry to ask. You need to have a conversation. But Eli's nanny can't go to swimming this week. So can I please maybe leave at like half an hour earlier, come in earlier and take him to swimming? And she's like, why does your nanny take her son to swimming? And I was like, well, because it starts at 4:30. And she full on laughed. And she's like, you're joking. She's like, why didn't you just have this conversation with me before? She's like, on a Thursday, you can leave at 4, take your kid to swimming, and that's that. Like, and it's
Yeah.
having those open conversations. And that's something that, don't get me wrong, it also means now that every Thursday I have to wash my hair, which is annoying. But it also means I get to do that with him, and
Right.
I work Monday to Friday. So there's a
And
lot
how
of things
much
I don't get to do with him, but that has brought me him too
joy.
so
Yeah.
much joy that I remember the next day he went to school and she said, my mommy went in the pool with me. That was not the first time we went in the pool together, but
But
it
he
was that,
remembered it.
yeah. And it was
Yeah, it
like,
was,
okay. And you see,
and there
go ahead.
and they're moments that you can't get back as well.
That's
And
exactly what I was going to say.
I think something that you've mentioned about people asking, which is fine. You could have gone in and said, by the way, this is something that I would like to do. But equally, and I do put a lot on managers,
Oh, yeah.
because I I think they should have also come to you prior to you starting work to be like, tell us what's important to you outside of work, like, because of that, opening up that discussion, showing that you care of like, I have my son, these are the commitments, and or like asking a question like, is there anything you're anxious about before we even start working here?
Yeah.
And it's, again, it all comes back to that people stuff. What, like, do you really understand and know that person opposite you? Because then you don't have any blind spots. I'm just going to go back into the chat because I just intrigued because of people on the call. So Ayanda's studying her postgraduate in law. So I think she's going down that route of law, and maybe going to be like what's her name? The one I love on Suits, Donna. Donna is.
Oh my God, Donna's my everything.
A force to be reckoned with.
She is.
So we've got Renee doing your doctorate in psychology, amazing. Kristen doing your bachelor's in business management with economics. Melody, you're currently working in your role of people and culture business partner. That's a big title. Wendy, you're currently completing your master's in HRM, amazing. Yeah, me recently graduating from my associates in hospitality management and now moving to different industry. Interesting. Really interesting roles and courses and things. And I think that piece of pivoting is another piece as well, because you mentioned it, Allison, and obviously Fiona's in that position as well of having studied one thing and now pursuing something else. And I think that's another thing we have to be okay with and not be so worried about, I've studied this course and there being judgment that like, if you then don't go into that industry or actually you work in something for however long, you're like, you know what, I'm not happy here. Like, I want to try something else. And I'm going to actually put Fiona, you on the spot a little bit, if you don't mind, if you can come off mute and tell us what your kind of deciding factor to pivot and to switch industry and how you found that so far, or any advice you would give anyone who's maybe thinking about it. That's if you're in a position to come off mute, because I know sometimes people aren't.
I honestly don't really know how to explain it. But I just feel like hospitality wasn't really my thing. And I thought admin would be it would be more suitable for me, honestly. Because I feel like there's certain aspects from admin that I did in one of my internships that I feel like I should have done instead of hospitality.
And there's such different industries, and there's so much different. And thank you for sharing that, because it's, it doesn't have to be a big like event or a big incident that happens. Sometimes conflict in the workplace can be, a deciding factor for why people leave, and people think that's a justified reason for going, oh, I really didn't get on with my boss, really, whatever. But actually, just not being that fulfilled or that satisfied in a role is, a lot of the time a great reason to move on and to shift. Um, Alison, any of your thoughts on that kind of pivoting bit? And I'm just going to ask, whilst you're answering that as well, if anyone can put in the chat kind of what your, based off your experience today, what's been your piece of advice that you would give to somebody else if you were mentoring them on whether it's studying, career, that you think everyone needs to know, or it's really been critical for you. But yeah, coming back to you, Alison, on the pivoting piece.
I think for me, it just has a lot to do with having that self-talk with yourself and truly realizing what is right for you, what works for you. Because ultimately, I always say to persons, even persons that I work with, I'm like, you spend too much time at work to be doing something that you do not enjoy, that truly is not your passion. I heard on something I was listening to the other day that Gen Z's advertise their ideal career as a portfolio of careers rather than a one steady space. And I thought that was so interesting, because sometimes that's what it looks like for a certain individual. I always say, if I don't do HR, the forces be with us, because I don't know what I'm going to do. But for other people, they're good at like multiple things. They're passionate about so many things. Like, you don't only have to do this one thing. That maybe then you only work part-time hours at your 9 to 5. And then outside of that, like, we have someone who's employed here now. She works Monday through Wednesday, 9 to 5. Thursdays and Fridays, she's off, because what her passion is traveling. So she's a travel agent, like a
Okay.
for luxury hotels, and she arranges these trips and whatnot. So that's what she does on a Thursday and Friday. And she's like, I'll take the pay reduction for the peace and joy that that gives me. And she did that. And I,
I love that.
from my observation of it, she's been so much happier, like what you said with your Fridays. She's so much more committed now during her 3-day work week, because one, I think she's in a very balanced position in her life. And secondly, she's doing what she truly loves. So I think if you're ever in a space of like pivoting to find out, okay, this maybe isn't what I want to do anymore, there are loads of career tests online for free that you can do. And do those, figure it out. They're like personality tests that then say these careers would be good for you. And sometimes you look at them and you just laugh, because like, never happening. And then others you're like, oh no, I didn't think about that. I can see how my skills are transferable. And maybe exploring those options. And also too, about having mentors. And when I say mentors, I think on two very different ends. So even my peers, I consider them mentors. People in my group chat who I can message and say, today this happened, I'm feeling X, and have a couple of people who are in the same like age group as me, in the same kind of headspace when it comes to life, relationships, careers, that can kind of give their immediate feedback. But then I also think it's about having that person who's like goals, who you look at them and you're like, that's what I want for my life. That's ideally how I want things to look for me. That you can reach out to them and say, hey, can we have a sit down conversation? And having them that have that little more breadth of knowledge or experience or wisdom have a chat with you, help find a happy place maybe, and just listen sometimes, because maybe it's just one snippet of information that they're going to give to you that will really click for you, that helps you make that decision. I'm actually just going to call her out because she's on the call, and I don't know if I've even ever said this to her before, but Melody. So Melody was my manager before, and I remember when she first joined the organization. Well, I was there, went back to school, came back, and she was working there. I think that's how that went. And I remember when I first joined, she wasn't my manager at the time. I had another manager. And then when her career when she got promoted, I then reported into her, and we would have meetings, or weekly meetings with each other. And I remember just thinking a lot of times of, like, we would have our meetings that discussed our work week, and they would also just kind of chat, and how much more that helped me, because just listen to them, like, oh, so I can do this and this, or
Mhm.
this can look different, or I shouldn't be afraid to rock the boat or ask those difficult questions. Because I will say, at the time she came into the organization, and we're a very small team at the time, and she wasn't afraid in meetings to say things like, oh, what, it's kind of like this, so what for you?
Mm,
Um, and I just felt like, okay, maybe I can do much more than maybe what I thought I could do. So
yeah.
sometimes I think it's always to leaving yourself in that space of, every person can be an opportunity for me. And I know that sounds very, very much like you're using people,
Mhm.
but you can't view it from that sense. Like, you can both mutually benefit from
Mhm.
you having conversations with people, you asking for that help, because maybe them
Mhm.
having that conversation with you will lead to them thinking a certain way or gaining something from it. But
Mm,
I think if you are just, sorry, leading it all back to what you were asking, if you are just trying to pivot, I think it's about having a sounding board, and then
mm.
just truly listening to your gut and doing the
Yep.
research,
Yeah.
doing the self work that you
Yeah.
think will lead you to a space that you do feel like your career, whatever that looks like, is going
Mm,
to lead to the success that you think that looks like. And there's no black and white with that. That is
definitely.
completely up to you. What
Yeah.
success, a successful career looks like to you may be completely different to me. So
100%.
yeah,
Is
having
there's no
faith in that.
text. Yeah, there's no textbook, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. I um so people get sick of me saying gut, trust your gut, because it is my mantra. Like, your gut will tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
And Gabriella's put her pieces in the chat about things that she would advise people on. Discover what you value most, then go and pursue those values in every aspect of your life. I also like the next point she's made around go on a diet. Not just with, I thought that was a some advice I needed for myself. I actually do need to. I've just eaten far too much pasta in Rome, but um, yeah, not just with foods, like what you surround yourself with, what you're digesting. It is really important. But that values piece, it comes down to staying true to who you are, and that will change as well. So I know, for example, that I was super sporty, and I still have that as a personal interest. I'm a qualified PT, and I play basketball and stuff like that. So, but it's almost like I can get that satisfaction and that peace outside of my day work. But as I've grown, and I've got older, for me, the connection with international relations and connecting to home, connecting to Cayman is so much more of a motivation for me. So I think, sometimes, having your vision board for when you've maybe just graduated or whilst you're studying, then doing it a couple of years later or 5 or 10 years later, your motives change a lot. So don't feel that you have to be rigid, and understand that your needs will develop and grow at some point in your life when you have children, or maybe you want to get married or things like that, and family maybe becomes more of a focus point than kind of when you're maybe independently living. All of those things play a factor into what that career looks and feels like. I love Melody's point around being curious and being open-minded with every opportunity. I and also put find your why and follow it. So
Yeah.
wherever that takes you in life, and again, it comes down to purpose. So it's a lot broader than just what application it is you're applying for. It's what change or what impact in the world do you want to make. um, one of the things that I did, it's aside from kind of career per se, but um, when I went to Miami, actually, attended a church there, and they had a spiritual gifts test, and it's a little bit like what you're saying about the jobs test, that kind of thing. And you do all these questions, and it kind of spits out like what your spiritual gifts are. And one of you can kind of get an array of different things, like key aspects as to like what your purpose is and what that then could mean for your role in church, for example. So you might be somebody who's I don't know, your gift is a healer. So you might be somebody who could work more in the pastoral kind, or maybe even a greeter at, you know, the church, because then that means that you're having that kind of more personal interaction with people. And so I think my point being is, the more you focus on that core aspect of who you are, what that purpose is, you can't really go too wrong. But sometimes we can get distracted, or we can be in a crowd or in a type of environment, and we can kind of maybe think, well, maybe this seems a little bit sexier, or maybe this feels like I should be going down this route, but is that really for you? So I think some really great things for us all to think about. Any kind of closing remarks or real nuggets of advice that you don't want to leave this call, Allison, without anybody hearing? You want everybody to know, like, if you could do one, if they can do one thing when they come off the call to help them in whatever career progression aspect, or they're just about to graduate. I think a lot of people here are doing some form of study. You know, what would your nuggets be? And as I said in the chat, if anyone does have any specific questions, please pop them in the chat now for the last sort of 5 minutes. But any real lasting remarks you want to give, Allison?
I think we covered quite a lot, but I think always just be open to it changing, whatever that it may be. There's no rigidness that needs to be, and there's nothing that, oh, you need to complete this by this age. And sometimes it's about not getting rid of your goals, but sometimes maybe freeing yourself of the timelines, and just really being okay with whatever it is, maybe not panning out exactly how you wanted it to, and having faith in the fact that it all somehow always works out. No, and it usually does work out for the best. Whatever it is that it may look like, it usually yeah, exactly like what you said. Everything happens for a reason. Um, yeah, whether that's maybe one bad decision leading to somewhere that you didn't think that you would be, but then even having faith in that, okay, I'm gonna put my best foot forward from here onwards, and it's all gonna somehow come back together and go just as it should. Um, and then most persons on the call do seem more mature, but I remember my younger self was, I at the time I had a boyfriend, and I was so committed to making that relationship work that I put me to the side and a lot of things, my career to the side, a lot of things to the side. So I think it's also to not prioritizing whether that's a relationship or certain friendships or certain activities that really aren't going to be the means to an end of what your goals are. And not being afraid to let go of certain things, and having faith that in the right time, in the right space, the right opportunities, the right people, everything will come back some way, somehow, and all work out. And again, I just ultimately think it's just having faith in the journey and in yourself, and just doing what you love and trusting that that will make that take you there. I think Ashley.
I love it. Very philosophical on that. And I think one of the things that I would just add, oh, sorry, was my Wi-Fi off?
No, you're back now.
I'm back.
Yeah. Wait. Maybe not.
Great. Okay. Yeah, one of the things I was just going to add to that was whether it's the universe, whether it's God you believe in, or just the fact that nothing gets taken away from you unless it's replaced with something better. And I give me a lot of comfort in knowing I don't need to control everything. You know, that I will always end up where I'm supposed to be. And I think the other piece is around, no job is worth your mental health. Also, have that difficult conversation with that manager, because it will potentially, for 10 minutes of anxiety, that will save you potentially months or years worth of not feeling too comfortable I had a really, really difficult time once at an organization. Every time I opened that office door, like, you know, from the moment I came in, but the moment I took my power back and I sat down and I just had an open conversation, you know, if we shape it in the sense of it's not super scary, it doesn't need to be, because usually the person on the other side of the table just doesn't really know where you're coming from, or they've maybe been blissfully unaware that maybe their actions have made you feel a certain way. But invite them into that. You know, how they respond is not anything you can control. You can only control the controllables, but, you know, do have that conversation and prioritize your mental health for sure. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening and for joining, but particularly for you, Allison, for coming on, as I say, and just sharing your experience, and just sharing your thoughts and how you've got to where, you know, you are. And as I said at the start, we're so grateful to have you as Harneys as one of our super valued sponsors for Cayman Connection. And it's always great to connect as well. And just reading some of the remarks, Allison, you definitely did a great job in discussion today. Melody says you showed your confidence and knowledge on your topics, made some really insightful points. You've got such a bright future ahead for sure. And Renee,
Thank
again,
you.
just shouting your praise, Allison. You got some good fans up in the house, so I love it.
I have really good friends.
But yeah. But it's so helpful. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. Definitely be an innovation animal. Find out what you are. If you're a squirrel,
Yes.
hit me up. We can have some squirrel chat. And let us know if there's anything off the back of today that maybe you think there's appetite for. You know, just throwing it out there, you know, Cayman female women's network where you want to discuss challenges or have open discussions or conversation. You know, can Cayman Connection kind of play a part in that? But whatever role or course you're studying, we just wish you all the best. And just keep being you and thinking about your purpose and your values, and trust your gut as well. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Allison, and everyone today. And have a lovely rest of your Wednesday.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest.